I know you're here because of Dennis Banks, and possibly we could give you a little information on why Dennis Banks is here and how he came to this state and the injustices that brought him here. There are a lot of people in this state that have been supporting him. We've got over 500,000 signatures on petitions. Over 500,000 signatures on petitions. They've received over 100,000 letters, telegrams, and etc. who've come into the governor's office. And still this man hasn't moved. We're staging a mass march on the 3rd of April, which will be Saturday. We hope to have between 10 and 20,000 people there. They're coming from all different parts of the state. We've got caravans that are coming from almost every college in this state. We've got caravans of cars coming from the different Indian centers, and we hope to have, as I said, between 10 and 20,000 people. Now, this will start in San Francisco, California, if some of you are interested in coming. We will have arrangements for accommodations for housing, very limited food and so forth, but if you're interested in coming, we'd like to have you. It'll be the largest march ever held in this state for an Indian individual, and it'll be one of the most interesting marches because it's the first time this many people have assembled for an American Indian in this country to bring about some type of justice. I'd like to briefly give you a little history upon Dennis Banks' case and why he's here. Can you hear me back there? I don't know, I'm talking, this mic is a little offset there. Beautiful. Dennis Banks is he's a co-founder of the American Indian movement. He's one of the national Indian leaders in this country. He has been for about 10 years. And to Indian people, he's looked upon with a tremendous amount of respect. He's a man of integrity. He doesn't drink. He doesn't use dope. He doesn't lie or steal. And he's one of the few men that I know that I respect and look upon in this light. And he's one of the few people that young Indians look upon in this light, that they can look upon with respect and know that there's a man who's leading them and who they can look upon in such a light that they've never looked upon somebody like this before. Many of our people have turned to drink because of the damn injustices, because of the federal government's pressure and the pressure from society. But it's very rare you find an individual that you can respect, and he is one of them. And when I get through here giving you a little brief history of why he's wanted by the authorities in South Dakota, I think maybe you'll have a different opinion and a different light. You'll be brought into a different light on this man. This starts off in Buffalo Gap, South Dakota. A white man walked into a bar, a man by the name of Daryl Schmidt. He hadn't been in the bar but about 5 minutes, and he announced, he says, "I'm going to kill an Indian tonight." And within 5 more minutes, he had stabbed a young Indian by the name of Wesley Badheart Bull to death. He stabbed him in the heart. Now, there were 6 eyewitnesses present. And of these 6 eyewitnesses, 4 were white men and 2 were Indian. After stabbing him, the police came. They didn't arrest Daryl Schmidt. When they finally did arrest Daryl Schmidt, it was 3 days later. And they charged him with second-degree manslaughter. Now, this was one of around 260 Indians who've been killed in South Dakota within the last 2 to 3 years. No white man who's killed an Indian has ever gone to jail for it in that state. After killing this man, he was charged with second-degree manslaughter, as I said. The sheriff stated there wasn't enough evidence to support a murder charge, even though there were 4 white men and 2 Indians present. Now, when they tried Daryl Schmidt, he was let off scot-free. And now he's a martyr in that part of South Dakota because he killed an Indian and got away with it. He's looked upon with a tremendous amount of respect by the local white people. Now, later, Daryl Schmidt, after he was looked upon with such light and with respect and what have you, the mother of the murdered boy, Sarah Badheart Bull, she contacted the American Indian movement and asked them if they could help bring about some type of justice in this case. She got a hold of Dennis Banks and Russell Means and some other members, and they came down to support her. And when she went down and they scheduled a meeting with the local law enforcement officers and other dignitaries within the state to protest the light sentence of this man. The meeting was called in Custer, South Dakota. After they called the meeting, when Dennis Banks, Russell Means, and Sarah Badheart Bull and some other Indian people came down, the white people refused to meet with them, even though the meeting had been scheduled. They finally allowed Dennis Banks and Russell Means and some other Indian people into the meeting, and Sarah Badhartbull wasn't allowed in at this time. She wasn't there. Now, while the meeting was going on with Dennis and some other people, Sarah tried to get into the meeting, and we have pictures of one of the local cops. When she tried to force her way into the meeting, he grabbed her around the neck, choked her, and threw her down some steps. At this point, the Indians in the audience came to her aid, and a riot ensued. For her part in this riot, Sarah Badhartbull was given 1 to 5 years in prison. She served 6 months in prison, and she's now out on appeal. All she did was trying to bring about some type of justice to the murder of her son. Now, while the riot was going on, they threw tear gas into the meeting place where Dennis Banks and Russell Means and some other people were. He picked up a policeman's billy club and knocked a window out, and they jumped out through the window. He was charged with burglary for knocking the window out and escaping through the window. He was charged with rioting, being armed in a riot without intent to kill. That's a major offense in South Dakota. You can kill an Indian and walk away scot-free, but if you pick up a goddamn policeman's billy club and knock out a window, you can go to jail for 15 years. He was charged with being armed in a riot, burglary, arson, and a series of other counts, charged up to 11 different counts. Well, they tried him in Custer, South Dakota. And this is an interesting point. The state attorney general came down to personally try Dennis Banks. Now, this is an interesting man. His name is William Jinklo. He's wanted for rape on the Rosebud Sioux Reservation. This man, one night when he was taking his babysitter home, when he was a lawyer working for the Rosebud Sioux tribe, he pulled off into a cornfield, and at gunpoint he raped a 15-year-old Rosebud Sioux girl and told her that if she told anybody, he would kill her. Now, later this man was charged with rape, and there's a warrant for his arrest on the Rosebud Sioux tribe in South Dakota. This rapist personally came down after he was elected Attorney General and tried Dennis Banks. He intimidated not only umpteen Indians, but non-Indians alike, and not to come down and testify in Banks' behalf. Now, in trying the case, he put a gag rule on Dennis Banks where he couldn't talk to the press. But he, in turn, was spreading lies, innuendos, and other accusations against Dennis. Then, at the same time, he told Dennis Banks' lawyer, who was a court-appointed lawyer, that he was not to defend Dennis with too much vigor, or he would personally get him and blackball him throughout the state. After Dennis saw the man wasn't defending him with any great amount of vigor, he asked the man what was wrong, and he wouldn't say. Later, they found out through 2 other people who questioned the man that he admitted that the state attorney general had personally threatened him. Now, Dennis and his lawyers were not allowed the right to use a local law library. The state attorney general personally arrested one Indian woman who was testifying in Dennis's behalf. He arrested her off the witness stand. He intimidated other Indians who came down. Now, the interesting part is the jury selection. In the jury selection of an Indian by the name of Vernon Belcourt a few months earlier in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, they went through 200 people in trying to pick a jury of 12 people who would not say they hated Indians. And after they couldn't find a jury of 12 people out of 200 people, the judge dismissed the case. Well, when they started trying to select a jury for Dennis Banks, when they reached the 200 point, Banks asked them to dismiss the trial, and the judge refused. When they got up to 225, he again asked, and the judge refused. When they got to 275, he refused, 300, and when they finally got to 325 and 350. 350 people they got before they could find a jury of 12 people. 50 people came up in one whack, and when they asked them how they felt about Dennis Banks, they all raised their hand and said guilty. They have no rednecks there. They're red all over, those people. They don't make any pretense about how they feel about Indians. They dislike them. I was born in South Dakota on a Cheyenne River Sioux reservation, and I lived there till I was 13 years old. I've gone back periodically, and this is one of the more, it's the Alabama of the North. They make no pretense about how they feel, and this microphone system is not making any goddamn pretense either. It's not too hot. And, I don't know whether this is goddamn planned or what, but it's very goddamn distracting.
Just give it a little more service.
Dennis Banks was was tried, convicted, and he stood a chance of getting 15 years in jail. Now, when they selected the final jury, Daryl Schmidt, the murderer, and his wife were picked to be the two of the jurists. He finally got Daryl Schmidt removed and his wife removed, but two of Daryl Schmidt's cousins did serve on a jury that convicted Dennis Banks. So in essence, what I'm saying is, for an Indian to participate in a riot in South Dakota where Dennis Banks stood a chance of getting 15 years, Sarah Badhart Bull got 5 years. And yet a white man who kills an Indian can walk off scot-free, and he's a local hero. Now, this is a type of Western mentality that exists in South Dakota, in North Dakota, and Montana, and some other states I can name where you have large Indian populations. In trying to combat this, we're asking people to sign petitions stopping the extradition of Dennis Banks to South Dakota. We're asking people to donate funds and help with a legal battle. And by coming down here, I'm sure, I don't know what Dennis is going to talk to you about exactly. My general rule is to give you some basic information about why he's here. He escaped rather than go to jail for 15 years. Now, the local warden has personally stated in South Dakota that he doesn't want Dennis Banks in his jail because he doesn't want to be responsible for his death. Two prison officials have publicly stated that he won't live 20 minutes if he's placed in that jail. Now, the state attorney general who's wanted for rape, he personally stated that the only way to stop the American Indian movement leaders such as Dennis Banks is put a bullet in their head and blow their brains out. Now, this man is a rapist. He was also stopped at another time while he was on another Indian reservation. The police stopped him late at night, and he tried to escape from the police, and when they finally ran him down, this is Indian police now, and they forced him to get out of the car, he was stark nude from the waist down. No pants, shorts, socks, shoes, nothing. He stood there in all his white, hairy ugliness in front of God and the Indian people. This man is an exhibitionist, he's a sex fiend, a rapist, and evidently he molests young girls and boys at the same time. Now, he made the statement 2 weeks ago he was coming to California. And if he does come out here, I suggest that you take all your young boys and girls and possibly get them out of the way if this man comes to Southern California, because he's definitely wanted for rape. You know, I'm going to quit now.